Hey guys, how you doing? Ron Zanette here. Well, about ready now to get started building the STH10. But before I do that, I'd like to make sure that all of my electronic components are working properly before I start stuffing them inside the case and putting it together. So first up is going to be putting the processor and the RAM on the motherboard and checking that out. And in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and enlist the aid of this Case Labs SM8 test bench. And this is an awesome test bench. I'll put a link below. I did a review on it, so you can see all the flexibility and the capability that this test bench has, and it is set up for doing some water cooling as well. So you'll get to see that as part of the build and the testing here. So first up, I'm going to go ahead and install the processor on the Rampage 4 Black Edition motherboard. That's the LGA 2011 i7-3930K. That's going to be put on this motherboard. And then also we have this Kingston RAM. That is 32 gigabyte of DDR3 2133 megahertz RAM. So I'm going to go ahead and install that onto the system. I've already been using that on a test bed, so that stuff works great. I've been overclocking that system on the EVGA Dark X79, and so that RAM I know is good, but I want to test it out on this motherboard as well to make sure everything's good here as well. So let me go ahead and get started mounting all this, and I'll give you some shots along the way. Now here's a nice look at the Rampage 4 Black Edition motherboard. Just beautiful. I love all the dark. I love the darkness of this motherboard, all the black. And there are some little red bits on there. I guess the start button's okay. I don't know why those little, I don't know what they are, those little caps down over here are red. Maybe part of the audio, that's part of the audio portion of the motherboard, but I wish those weren't there. But other than that, that's really sharp, and it's got plenty of nice silver. So the contrast that I'm going to have with all the silver bits in the water cooling loop and the blocks and all that, it's going to look great. So anyway, just a quick look at the motherboard. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the processor in and the RAM. Okay, I've got the CPU installed and 32 gig of the HyperBeast Kingston RAM, and I realized that I also had another set of the exact same RAM, 32 gig more, that had not needed for a build. So I think I'm going to go ahead and use it, and I'm going to install it on in the system and see if I can get a good overclock with 64 gigabytes of RAM. That's one of the things I do want to have, a decent overclock on this system, and sometimes having too much RAM can tax the memory controller. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I can get a good overclock, but I'm going to go ahead and install that. So we're going to fill this up, and then the only cooler I had to test the system out, I was hoping I had an air cooler, but I did not. So I have an H100i that I'll use, and that should be easy enough to install, especially on a LGA 2011. Just you know, a few screws. I won't have to use the back plate that comes with it when you use it for other chips. So hopefully that'll be pretty straightforward, and that'll be a staple part of this test bench then. So I'm going to go ahead and put the RAM in now, and then get the motherboard installed onto the test bench along with an H100i, and hopefully soon enough we'll be able to fire it up and check out the motherboard and the RAM and the CPU and see how we're doing. Now, one of the options I have for my STH10 system build is using a Plextor M6e 256 gigabyte PCI Express SSD. Now, I do have some other options, but one of the things I want to try is to see how well this works with my motherboard, and see how easy it is to set up and how quickly it is to boot, because I'm thinking about using this for my boot drive. So let's take a closer look at this, and I'll take you through it, and then I'll also show you some screenshots setting it up, and then I'll run some benchmarks on it to see how fast it runs. So here we have the M6e. In the box you get a VIP card for customer service support, a little thank you. You also get an installation guide This installation guide basically just tells you to install it in an available PCIe slot, and it's got some descriptions on when it's working, what the LEDs mean. And then inside of here, basically, that's it. So here we have the card removed from the packaging, and we have the Plextor logo on the side plate with a yellow, green, and red LED. We have the M6e SSD format plugged onto this PCB, which is a PCI Express PCB. Now the benefit of having in this format is supposedly the system doesn't require any drivers or anything to boot up. It's supposed to recognize this card just like an SSD. So that helps, so boot up time will be quick. I do have a Revo drive, and that Revo drive is very fast. The only problem with it that I've had is that it is a PCI Express card that has a BIOS, so you need to load drivers for the system to recognize it, and then it goes through its own, power on self-test, which takes some time. So I do like that card, and I'll show you more about that later. I'm not sure which way I'm going to go, but I want to first at least try this to see how this guy works. Now let's take a look and see what the LEDs mean. So according to the documentation, the yellow LED shows when activity is present, and it'll be flashing. The green shows when there's a proper link established, and the red is simply to indicate power on, power coming to the board. So that's basically all she is on this, and let me go ahead and set her up. I'm going to put her into the test bench, which has the motherboard and everything as is going to be in the system. So we'll see how that works on the motherboard. So we've got that Asus Rampage 4 Black Edition with 64 gigabytes of Kingston Hyper-Beast, 2133 megahertz. Currently the video card on there is just 660, one of the WinForce from Gigabyte, as is a test card. That's not the card that's going to be in the system. And that's all that's configured to the system right now. So I'm going to go ahead and add it to one of the PCI slots, and then attempt to go ahead and load a OS on it, and we'll see how that runs, and I'll run some benchmarks. So let's have a look. Okay, in the test bench now I have my Windows 7 64-bit professional about ready to be loaded. So let's get the reboot here. So let's see. Alright, so we're going to boot from the Patriot memory. Okay, the rest of this looks pretty straightforward. So now it should not require a so it says it's looking for a driver. Well, that's not what I had in mind, so let me do some checking and then see. It's supposed to be recognized like a regular drive to be installed, so let me do some research. There was nothing in the box about installation requiring any kind of driver, so let's take a look and see what needs to be done. Alright guys, so one of the things I learned was in order to load Windows onto this Plextor M6e, you cannot do it with a USB drive. Plextor M6e and a Rampage 4 Black Edition motherboard with the latest BIOS and also the latest firmware on here still doesn't make a difference. Alright, so I'm going to fall back then to, right now at least, to my Revo drive X2, That is also a 256 gig drive, but it's basically got a RAID set up on there. So I'm going to load the OS on that and see how we do. So that'll be coming up. And here we have the PCI Express Revo drive. Now this does require drivers to load, and I have the drivers, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, but this is a pretty sharp looking card. I used it before in my previous STH10. So I think it still has an OS on. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the system and see if it'll come up, and make sure it's got the latest updates and everything. And I'll load all the latest drivers and everything for this motherboard. So I was finally able to load the operating system on both the Plextor M6e and the Revodrive 3X2. And one of the things that I learned in doing this is I build a number of systems, and I always load my operating system from a USB drive. And on Z97 motherboards, Z87 motherboards, I mean, I have not had any issues at all doing that. However, when it comes to loading operating system from a USB on an X79 platform, and especially with PCI Express based SSDs or controllers, you have to load it via a DVD. I had to get a Windows 7 DVD so that I can load it from that. Evidently there's just too much going on, and the USB ports will not properly allow everything to be recognized. I kept getting an error message saying that I had to load a driver in order to install the Plextor M6e, and after a number of hours with their support and ASUS, came to understand that you just can't load it through a USB port, whether it's 3.0 or 2.0, doesn't matter. You need to have the DVD. And even though I went through and updated the latest BIOS on the motherboard and the latest BIOS is on the M6e and the Revodrive 3, and none of that made a difference. It was good to have all that done, but none of that allowed Windows to complete the installation until I got a DVD with Windows on it, and I loaded it from that and absolutely had no issues at all. So that's just a note for you guys. If you're going to try one of these as a boot drive, you're going to need to do that. Now the Revodrive 3X2 does require a driver to be recognized during the install, and even trying to load that, there were some issues, but still never got to the point where I could load the operating system until I went ahead and loaded it via DVD. So anyway, that's just a bit of information that I learned, and now I'll show you some of the benchmarks that I ran to show you how fast each of these guys is. And I ran the ATTO, the ASSD, and the Crystal Disk benchmarks on these guys. So I'll go to put them up now for some comparison, and then we'll move on. So I'm trying to, again, remember, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to use for a boot drive. It's either one of these two or the SSD off of a native port off the motherboard. I haven't decided yet, but looking at some of the benchmarks here for between these guys might help make that decision. I'd be interested in any of your feedback as well.
So looking at the benchmarks, first we have the Plextor M6e using Crystal Disk Mark. With its default settings, you see that the read and the writes are pretty much in line with what you'd find with a regular SSD. When you get to the OCZ Revo drive, the reads are about the same, but the writes are significantly less, about 300 versus 550. So that's something to consider, but again, just remember this is a benchmark using smaller block sizes. For the ASSD, pretty much we see the same thing. The read and the writes are about the same for the Plextor as we saw on Crystal Disk Mark. But when you get to the OCZ, the reads were a little bit faster, but the writes again stayed around the 300 megabytes per second mark as well, especially in the sequential block size that is used for ASSD and Crystal Disk Mark. But now when we get to ATTO, here's where you see when you get to the block sizes, no matter what, max out on the Plextor at around 760 and the writes at around 550. Now when we're looking at the Revo drive, when you get to the larger block sizes, you see significant change, 1.5, 1.6. I mean, the writes are right over gigabytes per 1 gig per second. So it is significantly faster for larger block sizes.
So guys, one thing that I considered here, and by the way, excuse my voice, I just came back from an NFL game the other day, but I was thinking about future-proofing my system a little bit, since it's going to be the last one I'm going to have for quite a while, so I wanted this upgrade to last. A few folks started making note of some of the new processors that were about to be unveiled, and so I thought, well, now would be the time if I'm going to do it. So I thought, might as well go with the latest and greatest. And what we have here is an i7 5930K, the new LGA 2011 V3 processor, and a Rampage 5 Extreme motherboard, along with, you must have for the X99 chipset, the DDR4 RAM. So that's some G.Skill RAM, 32 gig at 2133 megahertz. So let's have a closer look at these guys. So there it is, the Asus Rampage 5 Extreme. Beautiful motherboard, although again, I'm not really a big fan of red and black because it's just been so overdone. But this is the flagship motherboard now for the X99 chipset, and the new Intel Core processors. So I'm going to go ahead and install it on here, and we'll see how much different it is maybe than the standard LGAs. It doesn't look like too much of a difference, but one of the things that I really like is this I/O shield. Really sharp, beautiful, shiny, just classy looking I/O shield. I really do like that. There's a ton of stuff in the box. There are a ton of features on this board. I am not going to do a review. There's plenty of other people that do outstanding reviews and have done them on this motherboard already, so I recommend you look them up online. But I am going to go ahead and get this guy processor mounted and RAM mounted, and fire it up and take a look at the BIOS, and I'll share some of that with you, and then we'll get back to building the system. Alright, let's take a look here. The locking mechanism, as opposed to the standard 2011 Generation 1 or V1, has the levers, so they pop out from the outside. This one looks like they go to the inside. They are knurled in. You flip them up, and then Asus has a little adhesive on there holding down the cover. Alright, so we'll just keep that kind of together. Alright, so here we have their implementation of the socket. Let's get out the processor. Here we go. So pin 1. Pointing way up to towards the this heatsink here. All right, so this lever goes down first, and this lever next. So there we have a processor installed. Yep, and then pin 1 is actually marked on the outside of the top hold-down bracket as well. And it's keyed. You can't put it in, and the PCB that the die sits on is keyed as well. So, okay, here we have some G.Skill F4 2133 C150Q 32GRR. This is CL class latency 1535, 1.2 volts, and the speed is 2133. Now this is a kit of 4 8 gig modules, and the motherboard requires that you, if you're going to put 4 modules in, you will put them in the red slots. So let's get some RAM installed here. Now this RAM I selected because it was on the qualified vendor list for RAM from Asus. I'm sure others would work, but being this is the one of the first X99 motherboards. I wanted to make sure that I had some known good marriages of memory and motherboard. So I went with something that was on their list. I don't always do that. I typically just buy the RAM that I like, and if it's on the list or not, and check it out. If it doesn't work, I'll return it, but not this time. Okay, so I've got RAM installed. Now, let me get it mounted onto the test bed and install the CPU cooler, H100i, and we'll fire it up. Alright, here we go. We have the H100i mounted, and just for those who might have been curious, yes, the LGA socket for the V3 uses the same mounting for your cooling as the LGA V1, so or whatever it was, the standard LGA 2011. And got the RAM situated. We got to put a video card on here next, but everything mounts together almost just like it did on the black edition. The one thing that's different in the layout is the 4-pin CPU is here, and the 8-pin there was swapped around on the black edition. Other than that, everything else is pretty much in the same position as far as power connections, all the debug code light and all that. Very close. There are some new features. There's a retry button as well. That's mounted here, and then of course you can see a ton of SATA ports there. So it's going to be interesting to see what I do with my storage now that I have that much SATA available on this board. But let me get a video card in there and we'll fire it up. Okay, we have the motherboard all populated now, ready to fire it up. Do one more check. And instead of the GTX 660 WindForce from Gigabyte, I decided to go with a Zotac GTX 680. A little bit more power maybe, for a little respect on this board. Although of course 780 or their ultimately Titans are going to be going on this motherboard, but for right now, for testing, let's fire it up like this. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. And then you'll get a glimpse of the first thing we see. We'll try to get into the BIOS right away. And here we go. All right. We have a BIOS now. See if we can get a close look of it here. It recognized the RAM right away. Talked about it, shows turbo mode, overclock tuner, set on auto, multi-core enhancement, auto. I'm just stepping through. This is the first time I've seen this here, so just stepping through these. I don't know how much of this I'll share with you guys. Change the base clock here. Let's see what the main screen shows. BIOS version, I'm going to have to get that updated. Right now it shows, wow, August 14th, not too far away. Today is September 8th, so less than a month old. May not be a later BIOS available right now. Alright. Speed, memory, 32 gig. Alright, actually it says system date is 9/9. I think that is correct. Stream tweaking, CPU level up, auto, just everything's on auto right now. Timing, CPU core voltage adjustments. Here's our serious tweaking settings here. There's all cores enabled. I have no boot devices in here. I had to use this quite a bit to try to get the PCIe SSDs to boot.
So that's it, guys. That's where I am right now. I know it took a while to get this video out, but one of the main reasons was because I decided to change course and get the new motherboard and processor for the build. And then, of course, in doing that, I ran into the situation where I'm going to water cool it, but since the board is so new, EK doesn't have the blocks out for the motherboard yet. So I have to wait on that, and as of a couple of weeks ago, they said it was going to be like another 4 weeks or so. So I've got to wait a while to do that. In the meantime, I'm going to continue testing pieces of the system. Anything I need to make a decision on, I'm going to work through, kind of show you that. So I hope you have some patience and stick with me, and I hope you enjoy the videos and you're learning something. So I'm going to continue on this ride to build this monster rig for me. And again, I hope you guys like it. So if you like this video, please favorite and like. And if you're so inclined, please subscribe. That's it from Ron's a Nut. Thanks for watching.